Welcome to the podcast for the World Builders, where we dive into the spells and the strategies for Black feminist world building and creative actualization. These weekly podcasts and newsletters are presented by Cedar School, which hosts a 9-week retreat designed to support you with seeding, marketing, and selling an income generating offer aligned with your values and your creative practice, right? It's both and energy on this side. Y'all, I just got out of part 2 of our world building workshop, and it was so energizing to hear about y'all's creative visions. Shout out to the folks that were able to join us and to the folks who have already enrolled inside of the retreat. I cannot wait to continue world building with you. Speaking of the retreat, enrollment into the Cedar World retreat is now open and closes soon, Monday, May 5th. So depending on when you're listening to this, look at the calendar. This will be the last time you'll hear from me until a week or so into the retreat. So I wanted to invite you this one last time to join us. And as a reminder, if you're just tuning in with us, if you're new here, the retreat was designed for you. If you're an academic who wants to divest from the university, right, and perhaps open up your research and scholarship up to the people, right? Maybe you are a creative wanting to ghost the algorithm and or just explore, right, forms of expression that can be too wild for traditional influencer marketing or doing something like securing brand deals. Um, right, maybe there's a whole bunch of folks that um, may not work with you if you say something like free Palestine, right? How do we generate income that's still in alignment with our values? We talk about that inside the retreat. Um, this retreat is also designed for you if you are exhausted, right, from the labor of your primary income source and you're looking to come up with some sort of exodus plan, right, some sort of transitional plan, right, whether you're trying to exodus or transition out of a full-time job at a nonprofit, for example, that's just no longer in alignment with your values. Maybe you're trying to transition away from like a string of freelance contracts or client work that's no longer feeling in alignment with your values. Or maybe you're trying to get out the artist grant application cycle, right? Where your whole financial reality is hinged on a group of people saying yes or no to your application, which is definitely where I was. I've been in all 3 of these scenarios and definitely was envisioning the retreat for folks like you and for folks like where I was in the early days of my creative practice pre-pandemic, right? So I want to invite you to reclaim your creative power through releasing an income generating creative offer. So feel free to check out the link in the show notes if you're ready to enroll and start generating some coin through your creativity. I have been in creative practice for a decade, but there have been times where I've had to get experimental with my labor in order to generate income inside of that creative practice. And it really has been through creating an offer that has allowed me kind of like the freedom and expansiveness and permission to play, right? An experiment that I had been longing for a while. So again, check out the link in the show notes if you're ready to enroll or just want to learn more. But before diving in, we're going to drop into our weekly podcast ritual, right? Where we give ourselves permission to breathe into the present moment, right? We're going to take a quick beat to become aware of our surroundings, just to get curious about what's happening inside of our sensorium. I'm going to take 3 deep, full belly breaths and invite you to do the same if that feels possible in this very moment. All right, y'all, let's begin. Mm, 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 mm. So, in that pocket of pause, like let's maybe note one thing in our sensorium, something that we were able to see, touch, taste, smell, hear, something we were able to feel beyond the senses we have language for. What can I sense in this very moment? So the window is cracked, so there is like this beautiful spring breeze and bird song that's just flowing into my study right now. Incense and candle burning as usual. And also, video is back, baby. At least for now, because I just got my hair done and I was like, nah, they got to get into it. Y'all got to get into it. So if you are watching on Spotify or YouTube, you can see she got some braids and there are like these musical instruments. These are, I literally bought a bag of musical instrument remnants. And I use them as beads in my hair. So if you hear clanging, like that's what it is. It's my hair. And these are also like the same music instrument pipes and washers that I use in my abstract paintings that one of them is behind me as well. So if you hear some noise, what are those things that be on the porch, y'all? Is it a wind chime? Is that what it's called? I feel like that's what it's called, but that feels too straightforward and simple. If you hear some like wind chiming energy or sounds, that's what it is. It's just my hair. But how about you? What is happening inside your sensorium? Yeah, what's something you can see, touch, taste, smell, hear, something you can feel beyond what even language, written language, oral language can hold? Now let's check in on our mood and intention right now in this very moment. Y'all, my mood is pumped up and inspired. Like I said, I had just got out of the last role building workshop and I was actually going to record this tomorrow, but I was like, I'm feeling good. Like let's keep up, let's keep riding this energy of inspiration. And just like again, all of the creative visions that were shared just allowed me to reroute into this work, right? And really remind like me, but then hopefully each other, or like why we're showing up under the banner of world building, right? Because it is a banner that is expansive enough to hold our desires for the worlds we're building, the worlds we want to invite others into. So just if you were there, thank you for that. And yeah, I'm coming here with so much gratitude. What's your mood? How are you arriving? Can we give ourselves 3 seconds to feel what we feel without judgment, without attaching a story around it? How are you feeling? Let's pause and check in. So we've grounded in our sensorium. We've checked in on our mood. And now we're going to check in on our intention, right? We go from task to task, from thing to thing all day. And I just want this to be the one place, right? That we may have had all day to pause, breathe, check in, and move intentionally. My intention behind recording this podcast episode is to ask, are we in a season of seeding or reaping? What's a given? Right? Are we clinging to the energy of survival mode when spirit is inviting us to breathe and take in the garden we've built, right? To look around and enjoy the fruits of our labor, right? And perhaps use those same fruits to create the next dish, recipe, or project with ease, right? The next project that we gather around, the next project that nourishes us. What if the nourishment that we're longing for is already in the fruit of your existing labor? But maybe we're clinging to the energy of survival mode and inventing fires to put out because we're clinging to the feeling of control and certainty. Maybe there is this busyness that makes us feel safe. But we know certainty is an illusion, right? And we know we can relax inside our journey of transformation. Our journey of transformation, the change that we're trying to welcome into our lives and our practice, doesn't have to feel disorienting. Like, what if it can actually feel grounding? What if we're in a season where our practice is inviting us to use what we have on hand to create an offering and trusting, right? That is more than enough, that what we have on hand, the materials we have on hand is more than enough, trusting that it is actually plenty. What if? All right, that's the question we're going to explore in today's episode. So what's your intention behind listening to today's episode? I'm going to pause here and let you reflect on that for a little bit. All right, y'all. Now let's get into today's episode. Episode 78. Certainty is an illusion. Hold on to this instead. Y'all know I start every single episode and like just really try to deliver what it is that's on my heart to share every week with a story. So it's story time. I was listening to the Mel Robbins podcast with Jay Shetty, right? And just a side note on this. I don't know why I feel like I need to explain myself for listening to the Mel Robbins podcast, but I have that feeling, so I will explain myself. On occasion, I will listen to, right, the pop culture self-help podcast of the day. I email Robbins. On Purpose with Jay Shetty is another one. IMO with Michelle Obama and Craig Robinson is another one, right? Just to get a sense of the broader cultural consciousness, right? It's partly the popular self-help / self-improvement podcast that actually inspired me to create For the Worldbuilders. I saw a gap, right? And my problem with this culture of self-help and self-improvement is like, okay, but to what end? We're proving toward what, right? If our self-help isn't animated by a politic rooted in liberation, then it's just the status quo wrapped in the fluffy industry of wellness, right? It's just more of the same. And it's the industry of wellness that is usually selling us products to be cozier inside of capitalism, right? Not necessarily giving us tools to resist it. It was the Combahee River Collective that said, if Black women were free, it would mean that everyone else would have to be free, since our freedom would necessitate the destruction of all systems of oppression. Now, how's that for self-help? Right? That's what I'm talking about when I say self-help. So anyway, side note aside, I feel like I have sufficiently explained myself. Back to the story. I was listening to the Mel Robbins episode, and Jay Shetty shared this Zen teaching, like this Zen principle that goes something like this. What's holding you back is what you're holding on to. And this episode was a good one. Jay was talking about how oftentimes when we feel quote unquote stuck, right, we're often simply grieving past versions of ourselves. Or better put, not allowing ourselves to grieve past versions of ourselves and welcome them to the table as collaborators, as worthy collaborators in what it is we're trying to do next. And that rang true and reminded me of a time in my practice when I was holding on to survival mode. And that was the thing that was actually holding me back when I thought it was the thing that would keep me going. I was inside a season where I was no longer in survival mode, but still attached to it. Right? Maybe you can relate to this. Holding on to an illusion of control and certainty for dear life, for it is this iron grip that got me here, right? Moving the colored time blocks on my calendar every week like Tetris in full control of the illusion of certainty and the construct of time. You know the feeling. Woof! We did it. Followed by the ominous feeling of, uh-oh, we could lose it. Best to stay busy. Best to keep doing what got me here, right? Here's what I know now. It doesn't matter how many time blocks you put on the calendar, how pretty your planner is, or how many times you ask ChatGPT to design a spacious morning routine based on your shifting needs, whatever it is, whatever like time gymnastics that we do, right? Whatever like whatever like mapping, creative mapping that we do around our time and our schedule and trying to kind of like fit it all in. If you are attached to the idea that the work needs to be new, needs to be perfect the first time, needs to be constant or else, right? Or if you're attached to the idea that there is some redemption or some redemptive quality in the striving and in the exhaustion, then we will constantly be made to do the grief work on the other side of abandoning ourselves. Our spirit will invite us over and over and over and over again to release our grip and reveal how that grip is getting in the way of our own flow. Right? This is a class we will be made to repeat again and again until we get it. Right. Okay, so what's an example? Right? Like what is this looking like in my life? How can we kind of draw some very clear lines like what this could look like, right? I might tell a joke, but I'll never tell a lie. I never teach or talk about concepts that I don't have an embodied experience with. So this is what it looked like in my life. For a long time, I was holding on to survival mode, and it was the thing that was holding me back. I had to grieve the person whose ambitions and desires were completely rooted in ways of working that felt exhausting and therefore safe. And ultimately, as you can imagine, weren't supportive. Y'all, you have heard me talk about my like recovering workaholism, like which is really what inspires all of my work, all of my theorizing, all of my holding supportive containers to reimagine our labor. Right? I've talked about this in the podcast before. I talked about this in the workshop today. It's popular to say that we don't dream of labor, but what if we did? What would it look like? What would feel supportive? What would feel sustainable? What would feel expansive? What labor would feel liberating? But what was holding me back was my attachment to survival mode and the illusion of certainty and control. That's what was holding me back. What now propels me forward is trusting the work that I've seeded and allowing myself to reap the rewards, the benefits, and the fruits of my labor. kicking my feet up and saying, I am worthy of this relaxation. Right? Most of 2024, I felt these two projects incubating inside my body. Two books. The Worldbuilders Way, The Black Feminist Survival Guide to Actualizing Desire, which is, I'm calling part memoir, part map. It's a nonfiction book, right? And then Psychopha, the novel, a fiction book. They weren't twins, but two siblings that were incubating and both wanted to emerge. It took me a whole year of trying to figure out how to work on both to learn that they couldn't be birthed simultaneously. They didn't want to be. I eventually had to surrender to the sacred timing of each. I had to release control. I realized both were requiring different forms of labor. Psychopha was requiring me to get lost and trust myself in that process and allow that process to take years, right? Psychopha is, I'm sure, a novel that's going to take years. Now, The Worldbuilders Way was requiring me to get clear and trust the tenor of my truth to serve others, right? No hiding behind poesis and the vernacular of Black studies, right? No esoteric, what we call inside CETA school. We don't need them art school paragraphs, right? Them artist statement paragraphs that don't need to be on the landing page or as a part of the sales pitch or whatever, right? I was like, okay, I don't need any art school paragraphs in this project. There will be plenty of space for that opacity and that wordplay inside of Psychopha. This is what these two books were saying to me. They were talking to me. The Worldbuilders Way also demanded a book proposal of 12 to, not 12, 2 to 3 sample chapters. And looking back on the past year, I can observe, looking back on 2024, I can observe multiple occasions where I tried to will, y'all, just will, swing, throw my mind, my body, and spirit into channeling chapters and letting the words flood the page. As they usually do, I usually can kind of just channel the words and let them flood the page, but I can observe the tightness of my grip, working with force instead of flow, right? And that was kind of being like impeding the channeling, right? I was assuming it had to be hard, assuming exertion of high levels of effort were necessary. It had to be brand new. It had to be mind blowing. This is going to be my first book. It had to be everything. Right? I was assuming I was in a season of seeding when I was really in a season of reaping. Since April 19, 2022, I've published over 160 newsletters, not all of them essays. But at some point, I realized there's certainly some sample chapters in there. There's certainly some work I can pull together in here. What if I don't have to do anything new? I don't know why it took me so long to come to that. But I now know, like, upon reflection, what my impulse has been. I thought I was in a season of spinning raw fiber into thread. Like, I thought I was in a season of going to the fiber plant, picking the seeds, doing pulling the cotton, spinning the raw fiber into thread so that then I can create whole cloth. When really I was in a season of quilting. I thought I was in the season of composing an original image when I was really in a season of collaging. I thought I was in a season of creating a whole new identity as the kind of artist that publishes books, right? When I was really being called to be in conversation with my past selves, bring them all to the table. The one that was scared, the one that was ready, the one that was naive, the one that was innocent, the one that was, right, holding on tightly to what it had to be and all the expectations. I realized I had to bring them all to the table, all my past selves, epitomized and personified in my previous work. I watched a video just this morning with not author, aw, author, author Jafa. Why am I thinking like author and Arthur? I'm like getting those words confused in my head. But Arthur Jafa, the artist, talking about sequencing notes that are already there like a composer. He talks about how composers don't invent notes. The notes are already there. They're just sequencing them and arranging them in a way to create a sound, a song. Right? I'll link the video in the show notes. But what if we are in that season of sequencing our notes, our past work? With hindsight, I can now say, full of self-compassion, I tried to force my mind and body to enter into a season of seeding because that's the energy I was most familiar with. I've had so many years of practicing inside of that sort of energy. Starting from zero, beaming with pride that I can take it to 100. As I will the work out of me, seemingly from thin air, I took pride in that. But more and more, my practice is demanding stewardship energy from me. And maybe your practice is demanding the same from you. Dropping into the energy of a maintenance worker, right? Which might be deemed less sexy in our culture of colonization and innovation and shiny new, but is essential to anything we want to last in the long run, right? Like this maintenance energy is essential energy. There's this article titled, "This Japanese Shrine Has Been Torn Down and Rebuilt Every 20 Years for the Past Millennium." And it's all about the ways in which this practice reinvigorates spiritual and community bonds. And it's a tradition that keeps Japanese artisans, their skills alive. That's the energy. That sacred energy is what I want to be inside of my practice. Right? Can we move from the energy of assuming that we have to will the work out of us to produce a new thing? Move out of that energy and into the energy of allowing the garden of our body of work to produce, instead of assuming that our physical bodies always need to. All right. What if we allow the labor that what if we build on top of the labor we've already done? What if we enter into a habit and an impulse of building on top of the labor of our ancestors, the labor they've already done, the labor that all of the Black feminists before us have done? What if we become maintenance workers? This doesn't mean that we still don't have to exert any effort or do any work, right? We're allowing the garden to produce instead of assuming that we, you, our physical bodies always needs to. Right? But of course, I need to pick the root vegetables and the collards if that's what I'm hungry for. Of course, if we want a bouquet of wildflowers, we must go out there and pick them. Of course. If we want to reciprocate the generosity of the garden, then we must water it. But this is a very different energy than thinking you are in a season of having to turn over the soil and start anew with the compost of your old life and the seeds of wisdom it provided. Perhaps you're in a season of collaborating with the archive of your past selves and letting the development of your next offer be easy. Finally, relaxing into all the energy, effort, and spirit that got you here. Now, the question that we tend to ask folks who are recovering overachievers is, girl, Save it, right? Save all this off like bullshit. Would you have gotten to where you are if you weren't engaged in those unhealthy work habits in the beginning? If you didn't push yourself in that way? And here's the answer. Here's always the answer. We never know. We won't know. I want to say we'd be further along in our journey, maybe healthier even, not needing as many down periods and recovery periods from burnout, but we just don't know. And that's not the point. The point is grounding in the present in order to understand what season we're in now, right now. I am realizing I am in a season of reaping. And I'm talking to you if you feel you are too. Clinging to the energy of survival mode when there are no fires to put out, right? What if you have built a sturdy structure and foundation you can rely on? What would it look like to rest in that, settle into that, relax into that, trust that? Stay ready so you don't have to get ready, right? But what if I told you you've been ready? You are ready. What if I told you you're never starting from scratch? You have your ancestors at your back. You have all of your past work at your back. What if you don't need to lock in to create your next thing, but loosen your grip? Open your hands. Thank them and honor all the work they've done. Say, thank you. I'm here to invite you to consider this. Harder work is not necessary to create the next thing. What if the fruits of your past labor are waiting to be chopped up to create a new dish? Then the leftovers from that dish are supposed to be composted into the soil, fertilizing future fruit to pluck, future offers, future projects. I'm going to try to cool it with the garden metaphors because I think you get it. We are in a regenerative practice if we allow ourselves to be. I've been talking with a lot of folks this open enrollment season, and I think a lot of us have limited capacity for our creative practices and businesses right now, right? Understandably so. Maybe most of our capacity is just going into caring for our loved ones, caring for ourselves. This doesn't mean that we completely step away from our practice, right? The thing that gives us energy, the thing that expands our capacity, the thing that fuels us and nourishes our drive, nourishes our will to keep going, nourishes our hope even. It doesn't mean we step away from that. It means we learn how to practice responsive and responsible stewardship, maintenance work. It means we pause, loosen our grip, and potentially let go, right? And grieve all our old ways of working. Then look around at the abundance of tools and resources we've most likely already created and greeted as tender caregivers and responsible stewards. Honor your current capacity by honoring your previous efforts and let it be easy. Only you know what that looks like in your garden, in your practice this season. Point being, exhausted effort not required, right? You know how like on the boxes it'd be like assembly not required. Read the package and read the room, right? Maybe now is not the time to throttle full speed. Maybe this is a good season for cruise control. Again, different seasons and projects require different forms of labor. Perhaps the labor is creating, perhaps the labor is compiling, perhaps the labor is creating, perhaps the labor is collaging, perhaps the labor is creating new source material, and perhaps the labor is using that material to make the next thing. Perhaps the labor is seeding, perhaps it is reaping. What season are you in? In part one of our world building workshop, Iria Do Costello, please, if you're listening to this podcast, if I did not pronounce your name correctly, please, please, please forgive me. But they dropped something in the chat that I think we can all relate to. I know this was definitely me, and this was their comment, which received a whole bunch of yes, me, +1 emojis in the chat. They said, living in a system that is accelerated and does not respect the time for creation makes me feel a constant anxiety running late, always to achieve my goals. And because of that, I'm pretty much constantly confused with my priorities. And I've definitely been there. And if you have to, take inventory of what you've already created. Workshops you've already facilitated, creative writing you've already published, works of art that are already animating your archive. What creative offers want to emerge from your existing embodied wisdom and living archive? Use what you already have. This is how we stretch time inside deep work, right? This is how we buy ourselves time inside of capitalism. What if we only created a brand new body of work every 5 years, and the time spent in between was just us remixing it, right? Synthesizing it, sharing it, reworking it, and letting the people inform the next thing. This is maintenance work. This is regenerative practice. This is allowing your ecosystem to be self-watering. As we come to a close, we're moving to the invitation portion of the podcast, y'all. If you would like to tend to your regenerative practice inside a cohort of other values-aligned world builders, then go ahead and check out the Cedar World Retreat. Enrollment to the retreat is currently open and closes on May 5th. Link is in the show notes to learn more and join us today. But here's just a good quick overview. Cedar School hosts a 9-week retreat where you will learn how to develop and launch an income-generating creative offer through these 3 major milestones. These are the 3 major milestones we hit every 3 weeks inside of the retreat. The first 3 weeks is dedicated to deciding on an offer that's inspired by your zone of desire, right? Not your zone of validation. We're not going to build an offer that is rooted in work that you don't really want to become well known at. You don't really want to become world class at, right? We want to root your offer inside of work and ways of being and working that you can imagine will continually water your creative curiosity over the long haul. Doesn't mean for a lifetime, but just for a minute, right? Or at least 5 years, right? Or sometime we're talking about years, right? Not months. Then we're going to create a framework, right? Because we want this offer to be generating income and be regenerative over time. But like, what does that transformation look like? What does the structure of that offer look like? We create a framework that we can rely on for years to come, that we can sell for years to come, that we can structure offers, books, even TV series if we want to around. And this is in weeks like 4 through 6 is where we create the structure of your offer. This is going to be the journey you will take your client, customer, reader, viewer, audience, student, participant, like whoever you dream the offer will serve. We want to imagine, okay, what journey of transformation are we taking them on? Because the offer does have to we want the offer to transform us in some way. The last 3 weeks are going to be dedicated to creating your sales system and inviting the people, right? This is where we activate the mycelial network of support that's already alive inside your practice, right? The people who are waiting to support or work with us as soon as we create the invitation, inviting them to. All right, this is how Seed to School was seeded, with just a personalized messages to a list of folks I knew. This is how I got my first 10 clients, and then how that like one-on-one offer turned into a one-to-many offer, and so forth and so on. So I usually take a break from the podcast after open enrollment to settle into practice with the other retreaters. So this will be the last time you'll hear from me for a couple of weeks, and certainly before enrollment closes. So reach out at info@seedschool.com if you have any questions before enrollment closes on May 5th. I'll be around to answer your questions as they arise. Truly, y'all. Thank you for tuning into another episode of the podcast for the World Builders, where we dive into the spells and strategies of Black feminist world building while exploring how offering the skills and wisdom from our journey of transformation might seed, resource, and deepen creative practices rooted in collective liberation. I firmly believe, and y'all, I'm gonna go to my grave with this belief. I firmly believe we all came into this world creative. We all came into this world with something to offer, and deep down, we all want to orient around politics of love instead of politics of fear. These are the beliefs that we try to honor inside of Seed to School. As always, this podcast will forever be free, but the best way to support the podcast is by sharing it with a friend, or taking a screenshot or a screen recording of the episode and sharing it on social media so other world builders can find us. And so our mycelial network can expand, because you will never, ever, 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 ever see a Seed to School ad while scrolling the metaverse. So I'm putting my faith in you and the work instead. Seed to School deeply relies on word of mouth to keep the lights on. So tell a friend to tell a friend if you want to keep these episodes coming. Y'all, I always say, I'm not interested in folks hearing about Seed to School because they saw an ad. Okay. I'm interested in folks hearing about Seed to School because a friend shared the podcast with them, because a neighbor shared the retreat with them, because a loved one said, this reminds me of that conversation we had last week. Check this out. That is how I want y'all to find out about my work. So definitely tell a friend to tell a friend if you want to keep these episodes coming. And I also heard rating and leaving a review helps too. So if you are on Apple Podcasts, please do rate and leave a review for the podcast. And if you're on Spotify, I don't think you can rate and leave a review, but I think you can leave a comment, and maybe that does something. Maybe that helps us out. But the second best way to support is by becoming a paid subscriber to the Seed to School Substack at $5 a month, but only if we have the capacity to do so, the financial capacity to do so. As I said, I'm gonna keep these podcasts coming regardless. Until next week, y'all, or until 2 weeks from now. Until next time. So be it. See to it. Breathe through it.